I think it's pretty cool helping people and then also kind of getting to see that come into fruition. Someone that, can't wait to move down to Tampa, get out of the cold up north, and you get to help them through the process and then see them here and love it.
You're listening to the Real Estate Sessions, and I'm your host, Bill Risser. With nearly 25 years in the real estate business, I love to interview industry leaders, up-and-comers, and really anyone with a story to tell. It's the stories that led my guests to a career in the real estate world that drives me into my 9th year and nearly 400 episodes of the podcast. And now, I hope you enjoy the next journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 403 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. Today, we're going to stay really local. We're going to talk to an agent who's with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Florida Property Group here in Tampa Bay. Her name is Julie Lawrence. Julie has been an agent now for coming up on 3 years, I think. It might be a little bit more. We'll find out for sure. And Julie has a very interesting backstory. I won't spoil it here in the intro. We will cover that as we get going. So let's get this thing started. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I am happy to be here today with you.
It's going to be so much fun. Now, there's a little bit of fanboy in me. My buddies know it. I'm a news guy. And so we're going to talk about that part of your life. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Open book
Awesome.
Right here.
Awesome. Let's start though at the beginning. I know that you've been in Florida for a while. If I'm going to guess, since college, which is for a while now. But I think you're not originally from here. And I think looking around, I found something about the Chicagoland area. Am I on track there?
Yeah. So I grew up in north of the city. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I got out of there when I was 17. So after high school, I left.
Sounded like you might have been in a hurry.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, growing up in Chicago, it's an amazing city. I love talking sports with people, so I'll have to ask you this just because it's got to be one or the other. Were you Cubs or White Sox?
I'll be honest with you, I wasn't really either.
You didn't care?
Yeah, my parents weren't originally from Chicago, so it wasn't like we were these like diehard fans. My dad watched NASCAR growing up, so.
Was he from, tell me he's from the South.
Yeah. He grew up in Florida. So, they moved around, but generally Florida. He went to high school in Seminole. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, that makes sense. NASCAR is big down here. That's kind of cool. We talk about like a childhood in Chicago is much different than a childhood where I grew up, which was San Diego.
Oh yeah.
Just because of the weather and stuff. But tell me what it was like. I mean, you're in a suburb. Did you regularly travel down to the city? What were winters like? Just kind of give me your take on growing up there.
Yeah. So we were like an hour north of the city, kind of closer to Wisconsin than the city. A lot of cornfields, very suburban, very boring is how I would describe it. Maybe that's why I left and went to Miami quickly. But it was, we didn't lock our doors. There was not a lot of crime in our neighborhood. We had great schools. I swam. So I was in, varsity swimming all 4 years. We rarely went downtown. My dad worked downtown, so he commuted in every day, but we probably went downtown maybe 2 or 3 times a year. So that was about it. It wasn't super exciting. So I was excited to go somewhere different.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I don't think there's any place you could have gone that's more different than Chicago, but Miami, right?
Yeah.
So what was the driving force there? Did you look at some other schools or were you kind of from early on thinking, I really like Florida, let's get to Florida somehow?
I hated the cold. So I think the farthest north school I applied to was North Carolina. That was the farthest north. So I applied to SMU, I applied to Miami. I think I applied to South Carolina, North Carolina, so definitely all in the South. I didn't want the cold. I knew that. And my grandmother, I told you my dad lived in Seminole. So we would go to the Tampa Bay area every year, once or twice growing up. So I was very familiar with Florida. That's where we spent a lot of our vacations. I didn't know I'd go to Miami per se, but then they gave me a huge scholarship. So I was like, all right, we're going to Miami.
Miami's a private school that only has, is this still around 5,000 undergrads? Somewhere in that
I
range?
think it's a little more than that, but
Okay.
it wasn't when I was there, it was less than 10,000. So a lot of people think it's this huge school. They're like, why can't they fill up the football stadium? Well, because we're not a huge school and a lot of people are from out of state. They're not local. So
Yeah, that makes sense. It's in South Miami. It's a cool little campus. It's actually my son's fiance actually grew up there, maybe 2 miles, 3
Oh,
miles from
wow.
campus. Yeah, right in the South Miami area. So I've been down there a few times. It's really a pretty campus.
Yeah.
But you were playing at either at the Orange Bowl and now they're playing at Hard Rock. And you're right, it looks weird. When you see a Miami game, the crowd, it's not an overwhelming crowd of 100,000 people like you might get at a Tennessee game.
Yeah. It wasn't, but yeah, it was hard. I was there. We did 2 years at the Orange Bowl and then 2 years at the new stadium. So I got to experience both, which was pretty cool because they're very different. But to get to either, it was a journey. You had to get to get to the Orange Bowl, you had to get on a bus and then a tram and then walk a bit. And the Hard Rock, you had to find a ride somehow. It was about 45 minutes away. So it was a little bit of an adventure, but it was fun.
That's cool. You have to be giddy with Miami's football team this season. I don't know who saw this coming, but as we record this on November 4th, they're undefeated and killing everyone they approach. Well, there's a couple close games, but that's got to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I wasn't a fan prior to going to college there. So I became a fan once I was a student. So we haven't really had a ton of great seasons since I've been a Miami fan. So I'm pumped about it.
Yeah. So you were a meteorologist. You worked for a couple different news organizations around the country. Obviously, Miami must have had a program for that, I'm just guessing.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
They did.
Did you know before, when did you think, I want to talk about the weather? Was it something that came after you went to school or was it before?
It was probably during school.
Okay.
I always liked the weather, but I wasn't one of those, I guess, your classic weatherman that was a 5-year-old saying they wanted to be a meteorologist. I always thought the weather was cool, but I didn't think of it as a job per se. But Miami had a very cool program. So they had broadcast journalism program, where you'd go if you wanted to do reporting, anything like that. But you also had to have a second major. So they had a meteorology major and they allowed you to do both. Was kind of intensive because there's not a whole lot of overlapping credits between the two fields.
Right.
But I was able to get a double major in meteorology and broadcast journalism. And then when I was interning, I interned at a couple stations in Miami when I was at school. That's when I really decided that I really enjoyed doing the weather.
Did you get to deal with any hurricanes? I'm just curious.
No.
You got lucky.
We had a really quiet, I was there 2006 to 2010 and it was quiet. So.
Wow. You just missed them. There's a bunch of stuff like in 2004 I keep hearing. We've only been here since 2017, but okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 2004 was terrible for Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that works out well. When you're right out of school and you're new to the industry, you have to kind of prove yourself. You got to you're generally not going to a big market. How did you do? Where was your first market? Where'd you have your first job?
So my first job was Abilene, Texas. Okay. Which was a total culture shock coming from, Miami. The clubs were open until like 5 a.m. and you get to Abilene. They're like, we close at 11 p.m. We're like, okay, so it was a big difference, But it was a great learning experience. I met a lot of amazing people. It was, a small town 3 hours west of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Okay. And that's where I paid my dues for 3 years. I met my husband there. So a lot of good things came of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's perfect. And then was the NBC affiliate in Tampa your next stop, or did you have to do something else along the way?
No, I was very fortunate that I kind of went from a really small market to a pretty big market. A lot of people have to do a couple of stops in between, but I was able to land at NBC. I think I was 24 then, so still pretty young. And
wow. Yeah. That's really good, right? Yeah. And so we mentioned this, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but when I first got here in 2017, Steve Jervey was the man. When there was a hurricane, it's him and Lee. It was great. So these are all the people that you got to work with and learn from, I would imagine, as mentors. Is that, yeah?
Yeah. I worked with Steve the whole time. I was there at the station. Lee was in the morning. So depending on the shift I worked at the time, sometimes I would see her as well. So she was there the whole time I was there. And yeah, thought we had a pretty kick butt weather team.
It was cool. Yeah. So there's for those that are local here in the Florida area, that's for you. Everybody else, well, don't worry.
Who are these people?
Yeah. I do have just a weird question. When you're doing the weather, sometimes you go out and do the live shots and not fun stuff. What was your toughest live shot that you did when you were at Double FLA?
So I was never the lucky one chosen to go out in any rough weather. So I didn't really have any, it was usually the reporters that were out in the elements. I was stuck we always used to say the weather center is an interesting spot. We're talking about the weather and there's not even a window. So for us to really look to see what's happening, we had to leave the weather center. But I did do some live shots that weren't weather related. The coolest one was when the Bolts were in the Stanley Cup finals.
Yes. Yeah.
Or the Stanley Cup. I can't remember where, but we were outside Amalie Arena and I was doing the weather forecast outside there in June. It was hot as anything, but we got to sneak in to see the game.
Sure.
So it was cool. Yeah.
Press credential comes in handy sometimes. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So now, but you're not doing that anymore. I want to find out more about that decision and why real estate. And maybe there was something that usually there's either family or there's a friend or someone who says, I think you'd be good at this. Is that sort of your path? How did you decide to become a realtor?
That's funny you said that because it was actually my husband. He said, what about real estate? You would like that. You'd be good at that. So I looked into it and a couple of things just led me to leave news, multiple reasons. And I, took the test and thought I'd give it a try and ended up really, really liking it. So
the path is usually a brokerage that has a lot of training involved with it, right? Like I'll just throw a couple out, Keller Williams or a Coldwell Banker. They're real in C21. They're known for their training of new agents. But that's not the path you took. You went right to Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually do have a ton of training.
Okay.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I would say we've got just as much as some of the ones you mentioned. They have like a BHU program where it's all day, 2 days a week for a month. If you're a new agent, it's just training all day long. So they've got a lot and at different levels too. So yeah, I went straight to Berkshire Hathaway and I'm still there now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And any mentors along the way for you there? Because I think that's always important for new agents is to connect with somebody.
I don't know if there is like one particular mentor. My broker Guy is amazing. I think that's why our office, most of his agents are here because Guy's great. And then we're really collaborative. Really, anyone in the office will help you. So if you're a newer agent, there's tons of experienced agents you can ask questions, collaborate with, co-list. I listed my first house with Dana. So I brought her to the listing appointment. We listed it together. And so we all kind of, I feel like, help each other out.
You'll be doing that shortly, or maybe you already are with some of the new agents coming in.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. I haven't been there that long, but to still be able to, people ask you for advice and, things like that. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Your favorite part of your new career?
Oh, favorite part. This is a hard one. I think it's pretty cool helping people and then also kind of getting to see that come into fruition, someone that, can't wait to move down to Tampa, get out of the cold up north, and you get to help them through the process and then see them here and love it, or vice versa. They have to sell their house and it's not a great situation. You get to help them through it. In the news, I guess you're helping people, but you don't really get to see that happen, right? You're kind of detached from anyone that you're helping through a storm or anything like that. So it's been cool I'm a people person, so get to help people and work with them.
Toughest part? What's the toughest part for you?
Toughest part is there are certain things you just cannot control, right?
Yeah.
No matter how hard you try, you can't control certain things. So
true. So true.
Gotta just go with it.
Julie, I thought you were going to say the toughest part of being a realtor is when you run into somebody, from Tampa and you have to drink a bunch of bourbon. That's probably the toughest part. So that was a Berkshire Hathaway, I can't remember the name of the event, the annual.
Yeah. Our
get together.
convention. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Louisville.
EHHS convention, and we
Yes.
were in Louisville, Kentucky, and just
Yes.
happened to. I met you and Dana on the plane. It was funny, and yeah, so we had a little event, and you showed up with some people, and anyways, that wasn't that tough, I guess.
That was tough for me. If you don't remember, it was tough for me. I was pregnant at the time. I couldn't have any burger.
That's right. So it was the toughest part. Okay,
Yes, it was. I was at a
but
bourbon tasting and all that.
Dana just took your glasses. Is that okay? Good. Sorry, Dana. All right. Let's talk about some of the things you're doing now. First of all, it seems you're doing a lot of stuff in South Tampa. If you had to pick and choose like where you would love to work in the city, is South Tampa kind of your favorite spot?
Yeah, I mean, I love in South Tampa. It's close. That's where I live. I end up doing work all over the place. But yeah, I'd say my home is South Tampa. So
yeah, it's very cool down there. It's kind of scary during hurricanes, I would imagine.
Yeah, we had a lot of, this was the first year I think South Tampa was really impacted greatly.
Mostly by Helene, right?
Yeah. Well, both storms really, Helene brought a lot of surge flooding into some neighborhoods, especially off West Shore area that hadn't seen it before. So that was significant impacts. And then Milton brought a lot of rainwater flooding. So we had a few spots that are flood zone X that flooded in South Tampa from Milton. So that was kind of weird.
I imagine that's going to create a whole new series of questions for you, especially if you're talking to, some people out of Chicago that are thinking about coming down here. Does that change the conversation a little bit after what we went through?
Yeah, at least right now. I mean, one thing I've learned from being in news is people's memory is short, right? So I don't know what it'll look like 6 months from now. Will people start to forget or not? But few out-of-state people that I'm working with right now, one of which originally wanted to be as close to the water as possible because he wanted a boat, now said, I think we're gonna go a little inland, I think we're gonna be out of the flood zone. So that is the sentiment with some people right now, is they don't want to take that risk. They don't want to deal with any potential flooding. We'll see how long that lasts, but that's certainly a conversation that's happening more than last year.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And there's always going to be those people that just want to be on the water no matter what. Yeah. That's never, it won't go away. No. They'll take their chances and maybe have nothing happen for 20 years again, or 100 in this case. Yeah, it was a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. You have launched a new series. This has been a lot of fun. I've been watching this. It's called Journey to Sold, right?
Yes.
And it's where you're talking about, it looks like it's a different transaction, the things you experienced. Yeah. Most recent, I think, was the one about it was a 100-year-old house and the challenges and the cool stuff. There's both, right? Yeah. Talk about where that came from, how you're doing it. I mean, how much fun is that?
So I try to do, a lot on social media as part of my business. And I work with a production company that actually shoots for me and edits those videos. Nice. And we were talking about doing a series, right? So one day a week, we post this series. So I thought, hey, it'd be cool, instead of posting a just sold picture, let's tell the story. Every house is a story. So I think actually I came up with Journey to Sold. I think that was with the help of AI, give me a name for this, and gave me 15 names to choose from. Nice. So AI can be helpful. But that's how I came up with the series, and it's fun. So I figure we'll do it for a couple months and tell some stories of different house sales and different challenges or successes that came along with it.
Yeah, and content's content, because now you can not only use it in different social networks, but you can take sound bites out, little pieces, and do all kinds of cool stuff with it. And that's super cool. Yeah, I like that. If you had to, are you thinking ahead yet? What's the next one? Or are you just kind of really focusing hard on this? Or are they just kind of hitting you another one says, oh, I think I could do this. This would be a cool little series.
I have not thought about any other series. So
okay. Not yet.
We'll see. Maybe I'll just do this one for a couple of months and then move on to the next one and try to think of something different to do. Social media is always changing. So
absolutely true.
The trends and what everyone's doing. I feel like every 6 months it's on to something different. So we'll see.
Cool. I look around on the internet before I interview a guest, and I found out that you really, really like English bulldogs.
I do. Yeah.
I'm assume you have an English bulldog at home.
Yeah. We have two right now. We have Romeo and we have one-eyed Freddie. We just adopted Freddie a couple weeks ago.
Really? And what happened to his other eye? Do we know? Or is it?
He actually was a stud. So he was one of those crappy backyard
Oh,
breeders. He lived in a dirt pit for the first 6 years of his life. It was terrible.
oh,
So the rescue got him when the breeders finally got rid of their dogs. And I don't know exactly what was wrong with him at the time, but his eye basically needed to be removed. It wasn't working. So they
oh,
removed it. He still gets along fine with just one eye, and he got adopted. And then sadly, his owner passed away about a year and a half later. So
oh
he was
no.
about to get into a shelter, but thankfully the rescue could bring him back in if there was a spot. We had just lost two dogs this year. So we said, hey, we can take him for a little bit. And we kept him.
That's great. And it's not just that you have bulldogs, but you're part of the Florida English Bulldog Rescue, right? This company where you actually found Freddie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah. So the Florida English Bulldog Rescue was, oh gosh, I think Jen started it 15 years ago. They've helped thousands of dogs. And I actually helped run the rescue for her when she had moved and had some other life stuff going on. And then I had my son, I wasn't running it anymore. I was still helping, involved with events, things like that. But she actually stepped away and retired earlier this year. So the Florida English Bulldog Rescue closed this year, which was
No.
sad. But a whole group of the volunteers started another rescue called the Florida Bulldog Rescue. They help Frenchies, English Bulldogs, still a similar mission, helping these dogs stay out of shelters and getting fixed up because they've got so many health issues. So, so that's where we got Freddie from. And yeah, big supporter of animal rescue.
I know that you mentioned they need a lot of care,
Yeah.
whether it's the grooming for one, right?
They've got some maintenance. Yeah, with the wrinkles, getting that clean. And they're just genetically disposed to like everything, like skin allergies, eye stuff. You got to spend a lot of money if you want to own it.
I want to know if this is true. They can't swim.
Correct. Yes.
They can't swim. Is that the only dog that we know of that can't swim?
I don't know. I've only had English bulldogs, really.
Okay. But they won't
yeah.
sink. They'll just go to the bottom. You got to jump in and get them out right away, obviously.
Yeah, I think occasionally you can get one that's maybe their body type works a little better, but knew a lot of people who unfortunately didn't necessarily take that seriously, and their dogs would fall in the pool and had drowned. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there you go. That's true. I thought it might have been people just pulling my leg.
No, it's true.
Are you a fan of Frenchies? I got to ask that last question. Are you a fan of the Frenchies? Because they're a different looking little dog.
I'm not a fan. We actually almost got a Frenchie this go round. My husband wanted one. Then we ended up with Freddie. They're a little bit higher energy. So we like the bulldogs because they're nice and lazy,
Yeah.
So I don't dislike Frenchies, but we've never owned one before.
Okay.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, look, I'm running up against your clock, and so what I'm gonna do is ask you the same final question I've asked every guest on the podcast. So
okay,
if you had one piece of advice you'd give a new agent just getting started, what would it be?
I would say give it time. Don't give up. The success does not come overnight. You might see someone that has success early on, but that's not the norm. So you have to work really hard for at least like a year to start to see stuff happen. And so that means working hard and not seeing results at the beginning. You got to start to, fill your pipeline and say yes to everything. Say yes to everything and give it some time.
Yeah. Somebody says, can someone sit in an open house? You better have your hands the first one up, right?
Right. Yeah. You may not meet a single buyer or have a single client the first 20 you hold, but then maybe on day 21, you do. Yeah. And that leads to who knows what. So,
and would you say for you, when you had those first initial successes, does it just kind of change the way you think and feel? And, it just kind of leads you to the next conversation with a whole lot more confidence. And it just seems like it grows on that.
Yeah. I feel like it definitely grows exponentially. Mm-hmm. I think especially to people's confidence in you grows, they're once you've sold a few houses, you've gone through the process, right? Because there's a lot of questions the first couple transactions that you have. So it does grow exponentially for sure, I'd say.
Yeah. I remember back in the day, I've seen a lot of first-time agents come in with their buyers. And if I knew they were a first-time agent, this was their first closing, I would always say to them as they sat down and we had a chat real quick before they brought the people in to sign, I'd say, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The answer is yes to all 3. And they're like, oh, okay. And it was things like, oh, I see here the home warranty is being paid by the seller. Is that right? And they'd go, yep, that's right. So I was trying to, make them feel a little more powerful, and so I love that, because we all know there's a big drop off in the first 5 years of people who just can't, follow through and can't get there. And so it's great to see you're having this success and it's not going anywhere and it's going to be a wonderful career. I love it. So if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that? And I tell you what, if you would send me some information, if there is any on the rescue, I'd be happy to put that in the show notes as well.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So the best way to reach out to me, whichever way you're comfortable with, you can call or text me 847-736-2587. That's fine. Or email if you prefer email as well.
We'll have that in the show notes.
Yeah. So honestly, call, text, email, all of the above work fine with me. And I'll send you a link to the Florida Bulldog Rescue so you have it.
Awesome. Julie, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for letting me be that weirdo. weather wonk or whatever you want to call it.
No, it is weird.
It's super fun, especially in places where, I've lived in Phoenix where we get to talk about being 118. And here we get to talk about incredible weather as well. So thanks so much. Congratulations on your transition to real estate. It's great to see the success you're having. So keep it up.
Great talking. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions. Please head over to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions to leave a review or a rating and subscribe to the Real Estate Sessions podcast at your favorite podcast listening app.